you wake to the rain, 1,000 small fingers pressing at the canvas above. It is the sort of rain that speaks in soft, patient percussion, not the quick, sharp clatter of a storm, but a steady, deliberate weather that seems to know how to keep company. It patters on leaf and tarpaulin, slips from broad banana fronds in gentle rivulets, and settles into the shelter's skin with a hushed, almost deliberate insistence. Lily opens her eyes to that sound and lets the rhythm find the hollow of her chest first, then the hush behind her ears. If you like, let your breathing slow to the quiet percussion of the rain. There is no hurry here, only the careful work of morning. Outside the low canvas of the shelter, the jungle keeps its private chorus. The soft rasp of beetle wings like distant paper, the occasional wet click of a tree frog settling into moss, the long, slow exhale of a palm frond as a droplet slips free and runs in a silver thread. Inside, the shelter breathes with its people. Mats, woven with the dark fibers of the place, curve on the earth like folded hands. A row of tiny lantern panels hangs across a central beam, their thin panes of horn and glass dulled by humidity, color washed to the memory of sunsets. The air tastes faintly of damp earth and citrus, bergamot and dried peel tucked into a jar on the low table. And the light is the soft, diffuse green of a world half hidden. Lily moves as the shelter moves, slowly with economy, fingers following a well-worn map. She reaches first for the low lantern, its glass warmed by yesterday's flame. Her hand remembers the way the wick sits, the way the flame must be coaxed out of the thin oil until it takes on a steady, patient life. The match whispers, the wick sighs, a small amber eye opens and scatters a round of soft light across the mats. The kettle is next, a squat, dented thing with a handle smooth from years of the same grasp. She sets it on the little brazier, arranges a handful of pebbles beneath to steady it against the breeze, and cradles the clay cup she keeps by her side as if the vessel were a small, sleeping thing. Tea is not an event that requires haste in this shelter. It is a ritual, a thread that runs through the morning like a gentle stitch. Lily measures with her fingers, 2 leaves of bitter green, a curl of dried citrus, a slit of stick spice from the last borrowing of cinnamon. The water at first murmurs, a soft, liquid whisper as it warms, then begins to breathe more audibly, a slow, rising note that is the kettle's first song. When it reaches the small, careful whistle that is not a shriek but a full-bodied exhale, less a call than an acknowledgement, she lifts the kettle with a practiced ease. The sound meets the rain outside, and the two make a private duet. The kettle's brief, loose whistle, the rain's constant, attentive patter. She brews a tea that smells of peel and something wood dark, passes the leaves through the sieve with the shy clink of metal, and pours into the clay cup. The liquid sets down with a small, satisfying plop, and a scattering of steam that smells like warm skin and dry leaves. She stirs with a wooden spoon that sings lightly against the bowl. The spoon's circular whisper is a small compass for the hands in the shelter. Lily takes the first sip with eyes half closed, as if tasting the space itself. People come in small measures to this community, never all at once. The shelter has its regulars, those whose mornings begin in a similar slow way, those who drift by for the warmth of shared quiet. First, Seamus arrives. He appears at the edge of the shelter like someone who has always belonged to its shade. His cane, smooth, a length of weathered wood with a brass knob that catches the Lent light, taps a gentle rhythm on the packed earth. He carries, as he often does, a sack of oddments, strips of leather, a coil of translucent film rescued from elsewhere, a few rusty buttons in a glass jar. There is a careful economy to his movements, a knowledge of how to make small things last. Rose follows with pots of seedlings, their leaves shiny and fat with morning water. She sets them down with a soft rustle. Trowel, soil, the faint whisper of roots shifting in their dark cups. She brings a smell of green that mixes with Lily's citrus tea, and the two aromas braid into something that feels like the shelter's own perfume. Behind Rose, the twins arrive with a different cadence entirely. Mara and Joss trot in together, small spoils tucked under arms, a length of twine, a fistful of glass beads, a handful of leaves of particular shapes, one glossy as an eel, another serrated like a tiny saw. Their laughter is a low, muffled thing at first, a ripple more than a shout, and they settle into a corner with the ready diligence of children apprenticed to the quiet arts of the place. Greeting is minimal here, soft as the sound that opened the day. Conversations unfold as though they were being sewn, short phrases, small stitches. Seamus comments on the leather's grain. Rose hums at the seedling's tilt towards the light. The twins trade a secret about where they found the beads. The sound is gentle and householdly. Spoon against bowl. A lid set down with a muted clack. The scrape of a chair pulled in. Lily offers each a cup, the steam rising between them like a private fog. They, one by one, lean in, receive the warmth, and their shoulders ease a fraction. There is a rhythm to these small acts. Kettle, cup, spoon, the steady, tiny percussion of rain, the whisper of cloth as mat is folded, the soft, metered talk that never climbs into urgency. It is the shelter's breath, the steady in and out of a shared life. The children, hands busy, begin to make things. Mara balances a bead on a length of the twins' twine and ties a clumsy little knot, her tongue peeking between lips in concentration. Joss folds a strip of translucent film into a crude prism, then holds it to the lantern light until it throws a smear of color against the canvas. They work with the sort of focus that renders them careful and close. Their small fingers make noises. Clicks, puffs, the faint scratch of knot against knot, that settle into the larger lullaby of the morning. Lily moves among these familiar movements like someone who can read the language of small things. She unwraps a jar of preserves, the lid yielding with a soft, ancestral pop, and scrapes the top with a wooden blade. The spread slides in a glossy, slow sheet onto a slice of dense bread. She places the bread on the low table, and for a moment the shelter's attention widens to this ordinary generosity. Bread is passed along. Hands that are not always tender touch the crust carefully, as though to preserve the thin miracle of warmth and taste. A small, almost polite shadow disturbs the ease of these domestic rituals. Lily notices, as one notices a seam undone in a garment one has worn 100 times, a thin line of light that has threaded itself through the shelter's canopy. It is a needle of brightness no larger than a finger, a sliver where the rain finds room to be curious. She looks up as the kettle sighs and stirs the tea, and the line trembles with each falling drop. For a moment she watches it the way one watches a page with a single misprinted letter. The thought of mending is immediate. Hands, needle, thread. And yet she allows the thought to rest, soft and patient, like the rain. This shelter keeps small priorities in order. There is always a task that can wait until the people in it have had their tea. The seam, small as it is not an emergency. It is a problem with a gentle solution waiting in the kind of slow afternoon that favors company. Lily's attention returns to the present. Seamus's slow, content hum as he curates his oddments, the smell of seedlings. The twins whispered instructions to one another as their fingers find the rhythm of braid and tie. She tucks away the seam for now, into the pocket of things to be addressed when the time is right. Instead, the group begins its quiet labor around other, softer practices. Rose lays out a shallow tray and fills it with cloth scraps, lengths of thread, and the brass that Seamus has brought. They set these things down in a scattering of small sounds. Metal ticks, cloth rustles, the hollow tap of a button into a bowl. The twins bring their prism, and Lily, with a small smile that is almost invisible, leans to watch how the light breaks when the lantern's flame moves. The shelter is a geography of touch. Hands come to mean more than names here. A palm that knows how to fold a blanket to reduce draft, a thumb that can coax a stubborn knot loose, a wrist that can smooth leather without tearing it. When Seamus reaches into his sack, he offers a strip of tanned leather that smells faintly of smoke and the road. It is dark and supple, edged by the small, purposeful teeth of a hand tool. Rose sets beside it a coil of near-translucent thread that catches the lantern light and looks more like a suggestion of silver than a strand. The twins bring glass beads that clatter into the bowl with a musical, muted chime. Lily's eyes catch each of these things the way someone catalogs stars. She arranges them with the quiet of a person who has everything she needs, except the immediate ability to do every job herself. Meals become small festivals of sharing. Today, Lily prepares a simple spiced filling, mash of root and softened fruit, seasoned with a thin scrape of nutmeg and a whisper of salt. The mixing is a series of gentle, repetitive motions. Thumb presses against the wooden pestle. Spoon folds the mixture. The bowl gives a low, contented sound to the contact. She hands plates around. People break bread in two, and the shelter's language for gratitude is the soft clink of spoons and the rounding of voices in agreement. No one raises their tone. Laughter is little and careful, a ripple rather than a wave. Mid-morning stretches into the kind of afternoon that invites the making of small things meant to catch both light and rain. The twins, inspired by their prism, proffer the idea of leaf windows. Small, framed patches of clear film set in a ring of leather, tied with beads, and hung from a line so that when the rain falls through them, it will catch and scatter fragments of color onto the mats below. Lily considers the seam again as the twins' idea takes shape. If they make a few of these leaf windows, perhaps some could be used as decorative patches, stitched over weaker places in the canopy, and made to throw back the rain in jeweled drops. She feels the small tug of delight that often precedes a plan born of mundane need. Hands begin to gather materials in earnest. Seamus produces a spool of waxed thread, the kind that slips through treated leather without fuss. Rose offers a piece of thin brass to make small rings to secure the leather frames. Mara sorts through the beads, selecting colors that will glint under lantern light. Deep amber, the soft green of young leaves, the smoky gray of river stones. They arrange their work on the low table like a quiet, cluttered altar. Needles lined up, a thimble waiting. The kettle's spent steam curling lazily into the air. The act of preparation is itself a soundscape. Fingers plucking thread make a soft, repeated click, like a tiny hinge. The brass rings clink a little when set together, a sound that seems to promise continuity. Needles are threaded with the small, near-silent breath of concentration. Thread snakes through eye of metal, and the threads travel through the cloth whispers. Someone hums, a single vowel held long and soft, an unworded note that ripples and settles into the shelter. The rain does not quiet. Its presence remains a constant background rhythm, the unerring metronome to which all these delicate noises keep time. At the edge of this motion, Lily returns to the canopy with the thought of inspection rather than repair. She steps to the shelter's outermost rope, brushes a hand across the canvas. Dampness gathers on her fingertips like a cool memory. Her eyes follow the seam where the light had threaded earlier. Now wider, the small needle of brightness more a thin crescent. The canvas has learned many repairs through the years. Patches of film here, a ring of leather there, a tiny hand-sewn cross of thread where rain had once begun a habit of finding purchase. Each repair keeps record not as a scar, but as a ledger of care. She runs her fingers along the seam and finds the place where the fabric has folded slightly, frayed at the edge. It yields, not with the sharpness of a fresh tear, but with the gentle complaint of a thing tired of tension. Lily thinks of the repair not as an obligation, but as an act of attention. There is a pleasure in mending, a quiet joy in taking something worn and renewing its usefulness. It is work that speaks a soft language. Stitch, press, knot, small sentences that together say, "We are here." When she moves back inside, the shelter seems to have gathered itself to the same idea without a word being necessary. The twins, their faces bright with the possibility of making something beautiful, push their stools a little closer. Seamus eases his sack toward the table, and from it he takes a length of clear film slightly larger than a palm, the edges already trimmed as though it had been waiting for an occasion. Rose sets down a tiny pot of paste made from boiled resin. It smells faintly of pine and caramel. Lily lays the leather strip across the table and smooths it with an even stroke, the motion a small ritual of preparation. They do not begin at once. There is a small pause, the kind that belongs to people who are choosing to do something together rather than being hurried into work. Tea is refilled, spoons scrape bowls, and the kettle settles into its hollow, almost conversational murmur. The twins test the film again in the lantern light. When Joss holds it up, the film throws back a little circle of spectrum that trembles on the canvas like a shy jewel. The shelter, which for a morning had been a place of simple continuation, gathers now into a more deliberate movement, as if the rain itself had suggested the shape of the afternoon's activity. Hands are the first to speak. Seamus takes up a needle and waxes his thread by rolling it between his fingers and the candle flame until it glows faintly. The wax seals the fibers and gives them the small, firm sound of a promise. Lily positions a leather frame on her lap, tucks the film carefully within it, and with a practiced, patient hand pushes the needle through the edge. Each stitch is small and close, the thread pulling the film snug against the leather with a whispering, taut finality. She makes a stitch, the long, low pull of fabric cuddling the thread. She makes another, and the rhythm of the needle begins to settle in the room like a second rain. Around them, the shelter provides a chorus of small noises that are neither intrusive nor absent. Someone folds a blanket. Someone else straightens a jar lid. A faint, tinny sound comes from the twins as they test how beads might be threaded to hang and tinkle faintly when raindrops strike the leaf windows. Words are few, chosen like gentle tools. "Careful," murmurs Rose when a bead slips. "There," says Seamus in the kind of voice that is more a direction of attention than an order. The shelter listens to itself work, each sound an acknowledgement of presence. As the first leaf window takes shape, there is a sense that making has extended beyond mere repair and settled into the softer habit of decoration. They decide together, no single voice higher than another, that the patch should not only hold back the rain but also celebrate it. A row of tiny beads will run along its lower edge to catch drops and throw them into small dances of light. A brass ring will form an eye to hang it from the beam, and a narrow strip of leather will be stitched to reinforce the canopy where the seam has breathed most heavily. This decision brings with it a small shift in the shelter's air. The activity, though still calm, grows more purposeful, like the tide drawing in to shore. Each member contributes what they can. Seamus cuts a thin, neat ring. Rose presses the paste to a crispness that keeps the braid taut. Mara binds a knot with a proud little thumb and shows Joss how to finish it off with a neat tail. The sounds collect, a rhythm of stitch and murmur, and the rain continues its patient percussion without complaint. There is, despite the work, an undercurrent of celebration. Perhaps it is the twins' bright anticipation. Perhaps the small pleasure taken in seeing useful things become beautiful. But laughter slips in like a soft breeze. It is careful laughter, the sort that does not rise to sharpness, more a ripple of pleasure that spreads when someone's bead-strung idea proves more lovely than expected. Lily catches their expression and thinks of how many ordinary things, thread, a bit of film, a bead, can be shaped into gifts that catch both light and rain. The shelter, in its small way, is learning to look like a place that expects beauty from necessity. Time stretches along habits. The kettle, long since quiet, exhales a low rasp as it cools on its brazier. The rain, unchanged in its devotion, provides a steady backdrop to the handmade music. The leaf window, once a thought, now sits on the table like a small, deliberate promise. A clear pane held in the warm circle of leather, its lower edge beaded in tiny jewels that glint wetly when the lantern light moves. Lily lifts it and holds it toward the canopy. When she does, light pours through the little frame in a slow, deliberate spill that paints the interior mats with a circle of diluted sunset. She pauses there, with the pane between hand and light, and her gaze travels, almost unbidden, back up to the seam that had first drawn her attention. It is a thin thing still, but the promise of the leaf window suggests the possibility of transformation. What is worn could also be ornament. What is frayed could be a place of new design. The idea settles in the room like a new, welcome weather. People begin to collect what will be needed for the repair in earnest. Seamus lays the leather strip along the beam, measuring with a slow, precise eye. Rose winds the waxed thread on a spool, its turns soft and steady. The twins tie lengths of twine together until they have a line long enough to string the newly made patches across the shelter's interior as both decoration and reinforcement. Hands move in a small choreography. One passes the needle, another holds the leather steady, another cuts or smooths or fastens. The tiny brass clicks and the muted clink of beads form a counterpoint to the rain, and the shelter's interior becomes an active, communal loom. Lily feels the familiar warmth that comes from being part of such a circle. Repair here is not simply practical, it is a language of care. Each stitch will be a small, spoken promise. Each patch will tell a story of hands that came together to make a place safer and more lovely. The thought steadies her breath, and she realizes how the simple prospect of shared labor can make the day shimmer in otherwise modest ways. There is a soft decision point, and it arrives without fanfare. The group gathers their small pile of tools and materials and moves toward the outer rope where the seam is patient and waiting. They carry what they have made, the leaf window that Lily cradles, a second patch that Seamus drapes over his arm, coils of thread and the little bowl of brass rings. The shelter seems to lean in with them, as if awaiting the first stitch. The rain, obliging and constant, provides a sound to keep them company, a steady measure for the hands that are about to work. They pause at the threshold. The canopy flutters softly in the breeze at the opening, a gentle, green-tinged curtain. Lily considers the seam one more time, fingers hovering over the fabric as if greeting an old friend. Around her, the others arrange themselves into an easy ring. Rose on her knees, smoothing the leather. Seamus with his cane planted for balance and a small thimble perched between finger and thumb. The twins close in, eyes bright with the kind of attentiveness that makes adults quiet and patient in equal measure. The shelter holds them all. The low lantern's circle of hush, the mats cupped around like a bowl. The jungle beyond that presses near, yet remains polite in its distance. The first human sound after the pause is the soft clearing of Lily's throat. And then, with the needle catching the thread, the mending begins. They work together, not hurriedly, but with intent. Lily makes the first stitch. The thread pulls through and settles with a soft, tight pull. Seamus follows with a reinforcing loop. Rose fits the leather along the canopy's inner edge and holds it while the twins secure the brass ring that will take the strain of water and wind. Each stitch is careful, each knot intentional. The community's small chorus hums a low, vowel-rich note that threads through the work like a phrase of an old song. No words, simply a sound that binds them. As the leaf window is eased into place, the shelter takes on the sense of a body being mended, not out of necessity, but out of shared insistence that the place remain gentle and whole. Rain kisses the new patch with a softer landing than before. The beads glint and sway, catching droplets and flinging them into tiny, awe-struck patterns on the mat. For a moment there is a hush of collective contentment, the feel of a thing righted enough for the heart to rest. It is there, in that quiet satisfaction, that the first part of the day settles toward a slower breath. They will go on. The patching will continue. The stringing of more leaf windows will be decided and made. The small festival of light and sharing will rise as evening folds in. But for now, the shelter holds this beginning of repair like a held note. Lily stands back and drinks the scene in. The tiny ring of beads under lantern light. Seamus's patient hands. Rose's ever-calm attention. The twins' bright, earnest faces. The rain continues its patient percussion, steady and dependable. You might let your shoulders soften with that image. The shelter taut and warm, people leaning in to mend, the small music of needle and thread layered over the steady weather. There is more to come. The steady, communal choreography of finishing the repair, the slow gathering as lanterns are strung and a modest celebration begins. But for now, the movement pauses at the point where intention becomes action, and hands meet cloth beneath patient rain. They begin to carry the things they have made back into the circle, and the shelter answers by fitting itself around them like a hand returning to warmth. The first leaf window is hoisted carefully into place. A brass ring slides over the beam with a soft, approving click, and when the tiny beads that fringe its lower edge catch a stray drop, they give a faint, bell-like chime. Too small to startle, just enough to make heads turn with something like delight. One by one, the patches follow. A smoky gray pane bound in dark leather. A smaller square whose beads are amber and green. Another where the film has been folded twice to give the water a chance to gather and run like a slow, glassy river. Each is stitched, tested, adjusted, and finally tied. The twins run the string along the beam, their little fingers knotting and retying with a care that is almost prayerful in its repetition. As they work, the shelter shifts into a new texture of sound. Needles make their quiet, insistent clicks. The low scrape of leather as it is smoothed and held. The soft tap of brass rings as they are set and tested. The whisper of twine being pulled through holes. Every now and then a bead slips and gives a modest, muffled clatter, and someone's small laugh follows it like a reassurance. The rain remains, constant and even, laying its soft net across the roof. You could imagine it listening too, as if the weather were interested in the manner of their care. They decide, as such groups so often do without fuss, that the new patches will not only mend but celebrate. So each leaf window is given a slight flourish. A row of beads in a pleasing gradient, a little ring to hold a sliver of mirror, a tiny loop of leather cut and stamped with a rough, almost accidental pattern that reads like a name only to the maker. Rose, whose hands know the soft patience of tending living things, threads a bead that looks like a new shoot, and sits back to consider how the newly hung window will turn the rain into jewel dust. Seamus, whose years have taught him what will wear and what will forgive, ties a double knot where the strain will be greatest, then taps his cane twice in a measured beat, as if to approve his own work. When at last they have strung a line from one side of the shelter to the other, dotted with the small framed panes that catch the light and the water, Lily steps back. The patch she made, the one that had been an answer to a small worry that morning, hangs like a promise. Rain threads through the panes, and each time it does the beads catch and throw back a scatter of little, bright reflections across the woven mats. The effect is gentle and, in this place, enough. The shelter has been both mended and gifted. There is no grand pronouncement, no ribbon cutting, only a soft mutual acknowledgement, the kind that exists as a brief shift in posture and a widening of the mouth into something like contentment. They celebrate, which is to say, they eat. Someone brings from a corner a shallow clay pan of baked plantain and root, warmed in coals and brushed with a glaze of caramel and ground spice. Another offers spoons of a thick, sweet broth poured into small cups. The kettle, its work done for the day, sits cooling and gives off a last thin, peppered creak as metal yields to dusk. Lily breaks bread and passes around little squares. The twins, who have known the comfort of such sharing since they could cradle a cup, offer a small dramatic bow that earns a soft clap from Seamus. The sounds of eating are considerate. Bowls set and lifted with care. The muffled scrape of spoon on ceramic. The soft hiss when something warm meets the cool air. Conversation continues, but it has leaned now towards the sort that smooths tired edges rather than sharpens curiosity. Tiny stories about a seed that finally sprouted, a remembered rain of a different year, a compliment for a well-made knot. There is an economy of language here. The necessary thing is not the telling, but the being together, while ordinary things are tasted and acknowledged. The light shifts. The lanterns, which had been kept low in the morning to coax the day along, are now allowed to spread a warmer pool of glow. Someone has stuffed dry moss around the wick of the central lamp to steady it. The flame breathes and settles into a small golden orbit. Shadows lengthen along the canvas, and the mats take on deeper greens and browns, colors that feel like velvet. The leaf windows glint and scatter the lantern light in tiny, jewel-like reflections. The room, which has been mostly a place of activity, begins to hush by degrees. The kids keep moving, tidying their beads, looping stray twine, because children's fingers do not still so easily, but their noises thin like a thread being pulled slowly into a ball. A low hum begins to weave through the shelter. It is not singing in any particular song. Rather, it is a vowel sound stretched long, a single tone held and shifted by breath. First, one voice offers it, then another, until the sound moves like a tide through the room, smoothing surfaces. Lily finds herself joining in without thinking, the sound leaving her throat like a simple, useful exhale. The hum has no words. It is a kind of catalogue of small satisfactions. Stitch made, patch in place, bead threaded, bread shared. You could imagine it as the shelter's way of telling itself, aloud, that it is all right. As evening deepens, small rituals begin to perform the gentle business of settling the body and the mind. Lily brings out a coarse woven basket of blankets, each folded with the same careful geometry, each smelling faintly of lanolin and sun-dried grass. She pats them in places before laying them down, smoothing a corner here, tucking a fringe there. The twins help arrange cushions and a shallow pile of dried leaves for extra warmth. Their energy, unspent, turns into a thoughtful exactness. One pillow placed just so, a blanket tucked under an edge to stop a draft. Rose takes a small clay bowl and sprinkles a dusting of dried citrus peel along the central mat. Wherever it lands, the air catches a bright thread of scent that mixes with the damp, leafy smell of the shelter. Seamus offers to put his cane aside and instead chooses a low, steady task. He fetches a small tin of oil and, with a practiced hand, speaks tiny comforts to the hinges of the lanterns, the metal eating the oil with a soft, grateful sound as nervous friction becomes a smooth arc. His voice is low and measured when he speaks. Often it trails into something like advice, given not for correction, but as an offering. A good knot nearly holds the story of a thing, he says in a half-sentence that is both an observation and a joke, and the shelter answers with an understated murmur of agreement. There is a small, deliberate slowing in the way people move. Hands that have been busy find ways to be still. The kettle, which had been the morning's constant companion, now holds the memory of warmth in its metal skin. A tiny sparkle of light runs along its rim from the lantern. Lily pours a last cup for herself, its steam a faint column that gathers and releases into the black-green dusk. She carries it to a small corner where a woven mat doubles as a seat and stool. She sets the cup down with a soft clink and wraps her hands around it, palms warming to clay. The drink is not meant to wake or to charm. It is simply a vessel for the moment, something to be held and to help mark the passing from doing to being. The twins are the ones who enact the simplest, most charming rite of the night. With whispering glee they thread the remaining beads onto short lengths of twine, knotting them at intervals so they will tinkle softly when rain hits. Then, with great seriousness, they take each finished string and thread it through the lantern rings they have made, and the brass eyes that Seamus has set. When the strings hang, they make a gentle curtain along the shelter's inner arc, so that when a drop falls through a leaf window, it has the small honor of striking a bead on its way and making a delicate sound. The bead's notes are remarkably small and polite. tiny chiming that restrains itself as if giving space to the rain's larger percussion. There is a moment, small, private, and perfectly proportioned, when everyone steps back and looks at what they have made. The shelter glows, soft lantern light reflected and refracted by the panes, the little bead strings chiming like distant glass in a cupboard, the mats and blankets arranged into clusters that suggest human shapes at rest. The repaired seam is no longer a single act. It is a line that has been reasserted by many touches. The leaf windows, where they meet the canvas, appear as if they have always belonged there, as if the shelter had been waiting for these accents all along. Lily's chest tightens in a particular way that is not pain, but a satisfaction that makes her eyes shine a little. Food trays are cleared with careful, nearby movements. Bowls are stacked and placed near the brazier. Someone dampens a cloth and wipes at the table's surface. The cloth leaves a faint, shining trail. The twins tuck the small tools away into a wooden box that they slide under a mat, and Seamus folds his leather strip and returns it to its sack, which he hangs on a peg. Rose waters the seedlings with an economy that wastes nothing. The water falls from the cup in a pale, even thread, and makes a soft, pleasing sound as it hits the soil. These acts, though small, are the grammar of coming in from the day, a language of habits that say, simply, we are here, and we will be here again. They move toward rest in their own time. Some choose to sit and watch the rain as if it were a story. Others lay pillows and settle into blankets. Lily arranges her sleeping mat near the far wall, choosing a place where the repaired seam makes a comforting arc overhead. She folds a thin shawl over her shoulders, feeling the fabric press cool and familiar. Her hands, which have been busy all day, are finally permitted to be still. She takes one last sip of her cup, the liquid cooler now but still readable as warmth, and sets it aside. Before she lies down, she stands once more and goes to inspect the seam with a tenderness that is like benediction. She reaches up, her fingers finding the leather edge and the path of stitches, tracing each small knot and loop as if reading a line of writing. The thread holds firm beneath her touch. The film has settled into its frame with a soft, weathered hum. She smiles, crooked and private, at the simple rightness of it. The repairs are not perfect. There remain tiny puckers and a slight asymmetry where the leather was cut freehand. But they are wholehearted and honest, and in this place that is enough. The shelter's noises thin into an even hush. The children's breathing slows. The hum that once built through the room is now a low, long note, held by only a few. The rain, which for all the day's making had kept its steady character, tapers into a softer cadence as evening deepens into night. Droplets gather and drip in a rhythm that might be counted if one wished, but counting is unnecessary. The sound itself is the count. It is as if the jungle outside the shelter leans back and sets down all its small arrangements for the night. Lily pads along the low table and rearranges a small stack of cloths, extra covers for anyone who might wake chilled in the night. She sets a little bowl filled with dried citrus and spice near the entrance as a further quiet hospitality for late arrivals. The scent sits like a small, polite courtesy on the air. She finds the sand timer that sits under the table, an old thing with a narrow waist and grains of sand smooth as powder. She flips it over and watches the slow trickle. The falling sand becomes another small metronome, a soft, visible measure of time that asks nothing of the body but to be present. She keeps it within reach, not to force time to move, but to observe its steady passage. people drift into repose. Seamus makes a small circuit to check lanterns and then settles against a pile of blankets with his cane tucked at his side. Rose hums a sleep song that is more breath than tune, something that seems to match the rhythm of the shelter itself. The twins curl in opposite directions and rest their heads on a shared roll of cloth. Somewhere, a jar lid gives a faint, settling click as it is placed on a shelf. The overall volume of the shelter lowers until it could almost be measured by fingertips. The barely audible rustle of a blanket, the even exhale of a sleeping child, the soft, repeated touch of a bead if some passing drop should strike it. All of these small noises combine into a sound that is not absence, but a different kind of presence. Lily lies down finally, arranging pillows around her head, and pulls a thin cover up to her chest. She feels the shelter's repaired seam above her, a line of hand stitches that has the warmth of other palms. Outside, the rain continues its patient percussion, now at a scale that feels like a pillow pressed softly against the roof. The shelter breathes with its people, an inhale of the world, an exhale of the world. And Lily lets herself be carried by that rhythm. She turns her face slightly to the beam where the leaf windows hang and watches the way the lantern light plays through them, making small moving maps of color across the ceiling. If you are listening, you might allow your own breathing to find a companion in this sound. There is no instruction beyond invitation. If you like, let your breath slow until it finds itself matching the rain's measured cadence. Imagine, if it helps, that your shoulders are rounded like the folded mats, relaxed into whatever supports you. The shelter is not only a place in the jungle. In the soundscape it offers, it can be a shelter for attention. A place where small acts hold meaning, and where care is a thing done with hands and with the soft rhythm of shared life. Lily thinks, without announcing it to anyone, of all the small stitches she has made in the course of her life. Literal ones, like the ones of the day, and others that are like them. Apologies offered quietly, plates passed without fuss, an envoy of tea carried to a neighbor with a bad sleeping patch. Each is an act of attention, each a small repair that adds to the architecture of belonging. In the shade of that thought, she allows herself to be contented. And contentment here is not the absence of want, but the presence of enough. The shelter holds these people now. The repaired seam keeps the rain from finding a curious way through, and the bead strings turn droplets into small celebrations rather than annoyances. The twins, for reasons known only to children, have left one bead string slightly untied. It swings just a little in the shelter's air, catching and releasing the light like a tiny, private metronome. The kettle's metal skin emits a final, thin creak as it cools for the night, and then all that remains is the landscape of minute sounds. At some point, at the edge of waking and sleep, Seamus mutters a story so soft it sounds almost like part of the rain. An old memory about a night when the rain first taught him how to listen. It is not a long tale. He never tells long tales at night. Instead, it is a small fragment, an image that slips into the room like a little lantern. A roof held by hands, a child with a bell tied to their shoe, a lantern that would not light until someone stopped talking and listened. Rose smiles in the dark and hums the hum that has threaded through the place all evening. The sound folds into the room like a hand smoothing a blanket at the edges. Lily drifts in and out of attention. She senses rather than hears the small exchanges of the shelter. A whispered question answered with a tiny grunt. A blanket readjusted. A small foot tucked in. The repaired seam above her is a presence. firm, stitched, warm from hands. She imagines the stitch's path as a little river of thread, a tidy line that says, with perfect modesty, "We made sure you could stay dry." Outside the shelter, the jungle keeps its distance. At night it is large and polite, making its own sound that is neither intrusive nor remote. The palm fronds whisper as rain runs along their edges, and a distant, contented frog joins briefly in the rhythm before falling silent again. From time to time, a droplet finds a bead and gives that tiny chime, a sound that is so small it feels like a secret between those present and the weather. In this auditory fabric, there is a kind of privacy that is both social and solitary. One is served by the company of others, yet the listening that one does is personal. Lily's thoughts find their way to small gratitude. She acknowledges it quietly, not as a sermon to herself, but as a simple inventory. For the people who came, for the tools passed, for the hands that sewed, for the children's inventiveness, and the way the shelter's needs had been met by imagination rather than by weighty resources. She thinks of the small beauty of something made useful, how decoration grew directly out of necessity, and how necessity gave permission to delight. It is an old lesson, of course, and one learn it again now with no fanfare, only the soft repetition of acts. Time becomes a braided thing, the sand in the timer, the slow seep of evening, the measured fall of rain. Lily allows each minute its own shape, unhurried and exact. She traces with a thumb the rim of the cup she had set aside earlier, tracing small, absent-minded circles that match the rhythm of the rain, and then lets the hand fall to rest at her side. Her eyelids feel pleasantly heavy, the kind of tiredness that comes from useful labor and from being seen and being part of the seeing. There is comfort in this exhaustion because it is shared. It is the quiet kind that does not demand explanation. In the final part of the night, as the shelter settles into a sleep-like hush, Lily hears a small sound that makes her smile. The twins, with some final energy, have crept to the central beam and exchanged a series of soft signals by tapping their knuckles in a code that is understood only by the very young. Seamus chuckles without waking fully, and Rose answers with a soft, indulgent scolding. For a moment the room is brightened by this secret play, which might as well be a private star for what passes for an audience of 4. Then the secret ends, and the room contracts inward like a breath that completes itself. Eyes close, mouths relax. The hum that threaded the room earlier decays into a single low note, and then into nothing more than the shelter's ordinary sound. The rain, the occasional settling creak of canvas, the near-silent breathing of those within. The repairs have done their work, the small festival has come to an end, and the shelter returns to the slow economy of sleep. Lily imagines, from the half-dreamed place where she now rests, the stitched seam as a line of small promises. Each knot is a vow taken in quiet. Nothing heroic, only the pledge that the shelter will be kept, that the people within it will attend to one another in ways both practical and tender. She holds this thought like the last thread of a tale, and then, as the world narrows and the lantern light softens into a pool, she lets it go. There is no abrupt stopping. The shift from wake to sleep is a gradual lowering of temperature and word. The last of the cups are washed and stacked and placed away. A cloth is smoothed and folded once more. The twins' bead strings swing gently and throw now faint jewels across the mats when a droplet moves. The rain, which has been the evening's principal companion, continues its patient dialogue with the canopy. It does not hurry, it does not demand, it only stays. Before closing her eyes entirely, Lily offers herself a small private permission. It is not a command to sleep, but a tender allowance to lean in to the room's peace. She breathes in the smell of citrus and resin, the faint tang of the earth, the warm residue of hands. She breathes out slow, and in that release there is an unspoken blessing for those who shared the day and for the shelter itself. This place, held together by leather and thread and the patient hands of neighbors, feels complete in its smallness. If you have stayed with this sound and this small story, you may now choose to close your screen or turn it low, and let the rain remain your companion. Perhaps you will keep listening. Perhaps you will let these images rest in the softer chamber of your attention. Either way, there is nothing to be done but to receive what is offered. The steady percussion of weather, the distant tinkling of beads, the hush of shared breathing. You may dim your device now or keep listening. Let the rain be the thing that steers you. Good night.